We're going to start with a question from Eric Klein, PhD. That's at Dr. Eric Klein, who apparently has a much higher level of education than I do. Albert, I always enjoy your annual article in January on names to watch as future GMs. That will come out, of course, towards the end of the season. As the season has progressed, are there any particularly hot names to watch? And are there any potential GM head coach pairings we should have on our radar? Yeah, there are. There's a good number of general manager candidates out there, and then there are a few guys that'll be at the top of the list or near the top of the list that are on my radar. And I'm not saying this to exclude anybody, but a few of the names that just are on the top of my mind now. Mike Borgonzi, the assistant general manager in Kansas City, long overdue for a general manager job. Really works in all facets of the operation with general manager Brett Veach, who he essentially came up with under Andy Reid over the first few years of the Reid era in Kansas City. Done a great job helping to put that roster together. And I think Veach and Borgonzi and so many other people there have done a great job of supplementing around Patrick Mahomes. Now, of course, all of this doesn't happen. The 3 Super Bowls in 5 years without Mahomes there, without Andy Reid as the coach. But if you really drill down on it and go beyond just, that core of 3 players that has been so sturdy and reliable and great for them, and Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Chris Jones, you'll find a lot of really good, solid pros that have made up an excellent defense. You look at that defense, some of the guys that they've been able to draft despite not having high first-round picks. Guys like your Trent McDuffie's, your Nick Bolton's, your George Karlaftis's, a lot of really good players who will be up for big contracts here soon. You look at the offensive line, how they drafted to fix the offensive line and going and getting Creed Humphrey, who's already been extended, and Trey Smith, who's up for a contract now. What they've done with some sensible free agent signings, given the constraints that they have from a budget standpoint, going and getting a guy like a Justin Reed to supplement what they have. Bringing in a DeAndre Hopkins in the trade market. So I think Mike Borgonzi is a name that should be at the top of everybody's list going in to the 2025 general manager hiring cycle. John Spytek's another one, in Tampa, did a great job of helping Jason Light build that roster up to a point where it would be attractive to Tom Brady. And now they've built something that's sustainable enough that they're winning without Tom Brady there. They won the division in their first year post Tom Brady. That was 2023. This year, it looks like they're going to be right back in it, even with the injury problems that they have. It's a young roster now. That was an older roster with Brady. It's a young roster now. That's just a really, really good operation there. I think both John Spytek and Mike Greenberg deserve general manager consideration. Spytek, I think, also has the advantage of having, seen what it looked like, what a Tom Brady operation looked like. He worked closely with Brady in the advanced scouting end. So he's another name that I think is a good one to watch. In Detroit, I think Ray Agnew is one that deserves a good long look. He's an ex-player. He's got a really good feel for the way a building works and what goes into putting together a great football operation. He's seen it as a player. Now he's seen it as an executive. He's been Brad Holmes' right-hand man in helping to build the thing up. And he was also with Brad Holmes in Los Angeles. So he's been part of the building process now in 2 places. Again, an ex-player who's worked on the player development side, who's worked on the scouting side, who just has a ton of good applicable experience. And then if we want to look further with Detroit, I think another name to look at would be Lance Newmark, who Adam Peters hired as assistant general manager with the Commanders. He, of course, spent all those years in Detroit, saw the ups, saw the downs, is a scout, and did obviously a great job in helping to build the Lions up. And now, here he is in Washington in year 1, and they're right in the playoff hunt. And then another name would be in Buffalo, Terrence Gray, who's been a rising young executive there. I think he checks a lot of boxes, and he's somebody who, again, was there in building the Bills up. Was integral in the Stephon Diggs trade a few years ago, and has been a huge part of the college scouting process for them in building the roster up to where it is now. And then going through the reset, with so many big names out the door this offseason. your Micah Hyde, your Jordan Poyer, Tre'Davious White. We've been over this before. Your Stephon Diggs, your Mitch Morrises. So, part of the reason why they've been in such a good position to reset, obviously part of it being a huge part of it being Josh Allen, but they've also been able to have guys in the pipeline. So those would be some names from a general manager standpoint that I would look at. And if you're wanting to pair some of those guys with potential head coaching candidates, you can do the obvious connect the dots thing, right? So Terrence Gray's with Joe Brady in Buffalo. Lance Newmark and Ray Agnew have experience. Both of them have experience with both Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. Both those guys, I think, are excellent head coaching candidates. Mike Borgonzi goes way back with Brian Flores, all the way to Boston College, I believe. That would be I think a good solid pairing. Borgonzi also was in Kansas City with Mike Vrabel. Vrabel, of course, I think will be out there as, a really good name. Spytech, has experience. He a former Michigan player. Could he be somebody who you'd pair with a Jesse Minter? So I look at a lot of these names. You can make the logical connections there with some of those names. It's going to be a really interesting hiring cycle. I do think they're going to be, a few general manager openings, not as many as the head coaching openings, but there are a lot of really good names. And again, I don't want to leave anybody out, but I think that those are some real good names to kind of get you started as guys who have been waiting, guys who have had to wait their turn. And, there are some retread candidates too that I think are really good, but those would be some first-time GM candidates who have paid their dues, have waited their turn, and now I think are very ready in the same way like an Adam Peters was ready when he took the Washington job, and we saw how that turned out. All right, our second question from Arthur Jaramillo, that's at @RC_Jaramillo. Does Cincinnati move on from Zac Taylor, or can staff changes be enough to save his job? I'm going to come pretty hard on this one, Arthur. I think the Bengals would be insane to get rid of Zac Taylor based on what he's accomplished there, based on the fit he is for their franchise. The Bengals also don't have a lot of history of being herky-jerky with their head coaches. They gave Marvin Lewis a ton of time. They were even patient before that with guys like Mike Shula and Dick LeBeau. It's not their way to, be overreactionary towards single years, towards stretches of games. It's just not who they are. So I'd be very surprised if Zac Taylor isn't the head coach there in 2025. I also don't think coaching has been the problem. I think the Bengals need at the highest level to reinvest and really start to go all in. And I'm not just talking about player spending, on building something special around Joe Burrow, because they've got a great opportunity to compete for and win championships over the next decade with Joe Burrow as their quarterback. They need to go in and pay Jamar Chase, and they need to invest back in their defense. That, I think, has really been the problem. I think Lou Anarumo, their defensive coordinator, is excellent. He's been working with a hand tied behind his back for much of the year. And I think you can see it all over the defense. Sam Hubbard has gotten old. He's a really good player for them, but he's gotten old. Defensive tackle, they really haven't been the same since losing DJ Reader. At corner, the young players they are counting on have not come along. DJ Turner's maybe just a backup. Cam Taylor-Britt's been inconsistent. Dax Hill was making some progress, but he got hurt. Then in safety, they really, came to regret losing Jesse Bates and Von Bell at once after the 2022 season because of what it did to them from a communication standpoint. So, they bring Von Bell back, and, now Von Bell is clearly on the back nine. So the defense really needs to be reset from a roster standpoint. And, I think that so much of this is going to come back to their ability to draft and develop. And they've been really good at that under Duke Tobin. But can they take the next step if they start to invest in a more complete scouting department, in going and making sure they are beating the bushes on the pro side, and in going and finding guys who can step in for them right away and fill holes? I think this season should be a bit of a wake-up call for the Bengals, in that their quarterback is playing at an MVP level, and they need to invest around him, and they need to take advantage of the opportunity they have. Again, I do not think that getting rid of Zac Taylor would do much to fix what the problem is in Cincinnati right now. Finally, question number 3 is from Kamel Brown at 777. Kamel, GM and coach candidates for the Jets. So Kamel, my first instinct is to say Mike Vrabel. The reason why is because they investigated Mike Vrabel in the past. It was if I remember right, and I'm putting this all together, it was ahead of the 2018 hiring cycle. They wound up that year making the decision to stick with Todd Bowles. Todd Bowles got the extra year. By the time they fired Bowles after the 18 season, Vrabel was already in Tennessee. I think he would be exactly what they need. Do I think he'd go there? Probably not. This is a guy who did an excellent job with the Titans, and I think in some ways um, became a victim to the way that some of these organizations work and the way that the front offices and ownership is set up in some of these places. And I'm not saying that Tennessee isn't going to make it out of, the rubble of all of what's happened the last couple of years. I think they've got good people in charge there now, and Chad Brinker and Brian Callahan. And I hope that ownership would have learned from the experience of going through it. But, Mike Vrabel went through a lot there at the end. And that's why I just look at it and say, would that one make sense for him? I don't know that it would. But I think he represents exactly what they need in a head coach, and somebody who's strong, somebody who is not going to kowtow to the desires of the owner or the people around the owner. And we've said this for a while now, and I said this all the way back on Halloween, on our pregame show on Amazon. The issue there that a lot of general managers and coaches have run into is there are a lot of non-football people that have the ear of Woody Johnson and that are influencing football decisions. And then social media / the internet influences Woody as well. And so you need somebody who can stand up to that. You need somebody who can push back on that. You need somebody who isn't going to allow that to engulf them. And I think Mike Vrabel is that type of guy. I think there are others that make some sense. I think Aaron Glenn would be another one. He's a former Jets player. To me, like he's somebody who has that sort of a lot of the same strengths as Dan Campbell, like can come in and be a culture changer and would have a very clear vision for what he would want in an organization. So Glenn would be another one that would make a lot of sense to me. Brian Flores, I think, is somebody again who comes in with head coaching experience and, I think would be very clear on what he'd want to build. He's from the area. He's from the Bronx. So he does have an understanding of the way that market works. And then, I think one other name that would make some sense is Cliff Kingsbury if you wanted to go the offensive guru route. Cliff is a former player. He did spend some time with the Jets. The Jets did pursue him at one point. And I think Cliff would be somebody, again, who has the experience of having been a head coach in other places, and I think would be willing to stand up and say no to ownership at key points. So those would be just some names that I have kind of in the back of my head. Belichick would work there too, believe it or not. Belichick kind of, I think, would be in a lot of ways some of what they need. But I think with that ready, aim, fire, or ready, fire, aim comment he made on the Manning cast, that it might not be the most likely thing that he winds up there. Also based on some things I know that he may think of Woody Johnson has expressed to people privately over the last couple of decades. Appreciate you guys coming out. Again, be sure to check out the print mailbag. That's on the mmqb.com. We got more questions, more answers there, maybe some more detailed answers. And we will be back for another Breer Report once week 12 gets underway on Friday morning. We'll see you guys then.